hold on. Well, good morning. It's Friday, and we're live here at Uneducated. And don't forget, uneducated. That means that you don't have to be educated to talk rationally about subjects of life, and especially things of the Bible, which is some of the main things that we talk about. Today I have a special guest with me. We are already 10 days into January 2020. And so it is good to have a special guest with me. And this gentleman here is Mr. Garrett Roth. Garrett, thanks for joining us. So all of you out there that are listening today, you are going to get an earful because Garrett has a lot of good things to say. He's a student at Youngstown State, right?
Yep.
So what are you taking up there other than space, Garrett?
I'm majoring in biology.
Okay.
Minoring in chemistry, and that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm trying to start the revolution there, but that's not working out too well. Nobody cares.
So, all right. Well, that's good. We'll talk a little bit about that revolution. That'll be good stuff. So let me ask this question then: biology and chemistry. Are you going to be a biologist or a chemist in a lab, or what's the plan here?
Well, the plan is basically that I go through biology stuff enough so that I can qualify for some sort of PA school.
Okay.
They're all pretty expensive, so I'm hoping between then and now one pops up in a public school, instead of a private school.
All right.
And if that happens, I mean, basically I'll be a PA, a physician's assistant. They're like a doctor, and they don't have as much schooling, so they don't get paid as much. But it's still like good money, without like all the commitments of a doctor.
Oh, okay.
So you still have to there are still commitments you have to learn throughout your career, obviously.
Right.
But you don't have to go through all the hoops. You don't have to spend all the money. So that's something I'm looking at.
Okay.
So
all right.
It's pretty cool.
And so as a physician's assistant, would you, say for instance you were on a bus and a person stopped breathing, would you be able to take a pen and jam it in their trachea so that they could start breathing again? Would you have the ability to do that as a physician's assistant, or no?
I feel like you get some basic medical knowledge enough to do some emergency stuff. But it depends. Some people, to be a physician's assistant, you kind of have to have a specific area. So there are physician's assistants for if you fix any part of the body that's kind of specific. If you're a dentist or whatever, and there's doctor dentist and the lower dentist, I don't think it works that way. But the point is you can do neurology stuff, you can do ear stuff, you can do a bunch of stuff that you kind of have to learn specifically about. So I think anybody kind of would have that knowledge, but you get into more specific fields and you kind of are more niche.
So you could specialize in a certain field.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. We just want to say a hi out to Naomi and Sarah and Rachel. All three of them are watching already this morning on Facebook and on YouTube. We probably have a few viewers already. Looks like I can't tell, but yeah, we have someone watching on YouTube. So just a shout out to you guys. If you're on YouTube or if you're on Facebook, go to YouTube and subscribe. You can go down into the right-hand corner and click subscribe, and that'll help us out, and then that way you'll get informed of new videos and different things that we're doing. So I have a special guest with me, Garrett Roth, here today, and we're going to talk about some interesting stuff. But one more thing before we get into our main topics today. Garrett, could you just explain to the audience maybe your journey in faith, because I know probably a couple years ago when we would sit down and talk, you probably would have considered, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but you probably would have considered yourself possibly an atheist. And so today, where are you at, and what kind of things are you wrestling with or struggling with, and what's kind of going on?
Yeah, basically I was kind of just a Christian culturally, basically from birth all the way up until around 11 or 12. And that was the point where in my faith I was kind of I should probably take this seriously. And so I actually started reading. I think I was it was a snowstorm and I was coming home, and I was praying to God, I was I'll read all of Genesis, just get us home. No, seriously, I'll read all of Genesis, just get us home alive.
The fearful convert.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'm I got home and I'm Mom, do you think I have to read all of Genesis? She's that's between you and God. So I read half of Genesis, and then I skipped around. And long story short, I just like it was probably one of those things where if I had better like teaching, I probably wouldn't have been an atheist at all for a little while. But it was one of those things where I read some parts in the Bible that I probably didn't have proper context in. I read a lot of the bloody stuff in the Old Testament, you know how it goes. And I was kind of like, there was a period where I was just deist, and then I was like, no, I'm none of this stuff. So I was an atheist probably like 3-4 years and kind of immersed myself in the community. And then, I don't know, after a while I was kind of just like, you know what? I kind of was like disillusioned with the community because they're good people, but like it's one of those people. They're just
when you say people, good people, you talking religious people, Christian people?
No, I'm speaking about like the atheist community that
the atheist.
Yeah, on YouTube and like people on Facebook and all. Okay. But I mean, it's as a community, it's like you can only talk about so much. It's kind of like not a community that you can be immersed in for a while because it's like, what do you talk about? You know what I mean?
Right.
But also, I just kind of like I went on my own spiritual journey in that eventually I smoked some pot. Now, that wasn't the impetus for me getting religious.
This is a live show.
I know.
Children are watching.
I know. You don't be responsible. Listen to your parents. But but I kind of, it opened me up, and it kind of just got me out of that spiritual rut where I'm like, because I was just like, all this is BS. The only thing that matters is what you can see and what's absolutely verifiable. And then when you start to get into...
So that's naturalism, by the way.
Yeah, I was kind of stuck in naturalism. Then outside of that, I kind of like figured, you know what? I got to thinking, I got to meditating, I got to praying a little bit. Then eventually I'm like, you know what? No, there is a God. And I got out of that hole. In terms of, and I believe in Jesus as well, in terms of all the things in the Bible, in terms of how real or metaphorical, how things are meant. There's a bunch of stuff you could talk about. But right now I'm pretty much deistic. Believe Jesus existed, believe he was a spiritual, what's the word? I think he had a very close connection with God in some ways. I think he represented God, but
you don't, at this point, you don't believe he is God?
Yeah, not so sure on the is God part.
Okay, all right.
But, he was definitely a transformational figure. One of the most important figures in history, and I do think he was a God-like figure. I think he had a connection.
Okay.
But, yeah.
And when you say deistic form, so you think then, too, that let's put Jesus aside for a second. If you have this God in the sky, you're saying that he kind of put everything in motion, and he kind of went on vacation, and now we have to kind of make things function or make things work as people. We have to figure this whole thing out, right? He's not a personal God. He kind of set things in motion, and now he's kind of back in the background waiting to see what happens. And if he needs to interject, he might. But
something like, you can get to talking about what you think like
right.
God is, period. But generally speaking, I think that there is a God. I think he is kind of like the create and then back up thing. But when you look at the world, there's some terrible stuff happening. It's largely incumbent upon humans to fix it. And that's the thing is, if you want to be poetic about it, we talk about God being in all people and us being, creators of God, reflections of God. God's dealing with it right now through us. If he's going to intervene directly, maybe so. But for now, whether we sink or swim is up to us. And
okay.
Yeah.
All right. I would just add that according to the Bible and the Christian faith, God did interrupt, and he did come down to fix it. And he did that by, at the right and proper time, according to Galatians 4, he sent his son so that his son might not just be a good prophet or a good man or political figure, but that his son might be the substitutionary atonement for all of our sin and tragedy. And so the idea of that whole message is that God did do something. He came and put on flesh, and then gave his life in place of our life so that we now, those who believe in him, can have life. Not just a new life here, but a life that goes forever, especially then one day in the new kingdom, in the new earth, when he will ultimately judge everything and put an end to everything. That's the view of the Bible. I'm just throwing that out there. Because you said, maybe he would come in. I believe that he did already come in. I believe he did interrupt life.
The job's certainly not finished.
No, actually the job is finished, but it has yet to play out to its final outcome. So even Jesus, when he was on the cross, he said those famous words, "It is finished." Okay? And so when he said that, what he meant is, there is my substitutionary atonement, my life is enough. I have given it up, and now it's finished. So that means now everybody has the opportunity to be free from sin and have life in him. It's a done deal. It's all done. Now, so now then he told his disciples, now you're going to have to live in this kingdom, and this kingdom is going to be twofold. It's going to be a kingdom here on earth, but it's a kingdom yet to come. And so then you have to play that out as you walk through the Gospels, and then you walk through the epistles of Paul. Then, so
yeah,
all right,
that sounds fair.
All right, so then as we get into these things, then that's kind of where Garrett's at or coming from, and that's kind of where I'm coming from. And so we want to talk about some things that are kind of pressing in the world today. And as you hear us talk about some of those things, you might get some ideas about why we take the viewpoints we take or what we're saying. And so the first one is we're going to throw up, we're like we said, we're 10 days into January 2020, and we already have what some people are saying a World War III on our hands, getting ready to explode. Other people are saying, come on, back up, it's not going to happen. And my opinion, it's not going to happen.
World War III?
Yeah, World War III. It's just not going to happen. I mean, Trump has just said that Iran seems to be backing down and those kind of things. We're going to place some sanctions. We're going to go through the whole dog and pony show again. Let's face it, we had to do something. We had to have fireworks of some kind in 2020 to start it off, and so that kind of whole thing happened. Now, of course, Iran is getting blamed for their faulty work in sending missiles because Canada, the Prime Minister of Canada, has come out. Trudeau, is that his name?
Trudeau.
Yep. He has come out and said that it was one of the Iranian missiles that they were sending over to try and hit our U.S. forces in Iraq that hit that airliner and killed 176 people.
There's some interesting stuff about it.
All right, so
it probably was. Well, here.
Okay, so any thoughts on that?
Let's start at the beginning. And
okay,
let's go back. Let's go back to 1953 very quickly.
So Garrett, we're going back to 1953.
Yes.
Okay, let's
try. You could probably spend, like, if we were to devote an hour to Iran for whatever reason,
right?
That still wouldn't be totally enough. Well, you could spend a lot of time between, analyzing the relationship between the U.S. and Iran. There's a lot of history there. But briefly as possible, basically in 1953 there was a coup. There was this leader, democratically elected leader, Mohammad Mossadegh, and I don't know a whole lot about his administration, but eventually he was talking about nationalizing the oil. And basically making it so that private institutions from other countries or domestically couldn't take it and use it as they wished. That didn't sit well with MI6 and the CIA, who overthrew him, instituted the Shah. In 1979, the Iranian population in what was called the what's the name of the religion? Islam. The Islamic Revolution. They had an Islamic Revolution. They overthrew the Shah, took a bunch of Americans hostage. Bad relations ever since then, and ever since then, the United States, a lot of senior policymakers, a lot of think tanks, have wanted to kind of get Iran back in the American sphere of influence and control them again as they did prior to the Islamic Revolution. So that's the basic history as a background.
Okay.
So going into the Trump administration, we had the Iran deal. Trump ended that, basically. And that's kind of the beginning of tensions. It was revealed that there was a plan to basically encircle Iran. So they're pretty openly, and when I say revealed, it wasn't like secrets were revealed. This was openly talked about. So that ratcheted up tensions. And that's the background going into the, the relationship between Trump and Qasem Soleimani. That is basically what started this, whole combative situation. And Qasem Soleimani is a famous general. He rose to prominence during the Iran-Iraq War. The Iran-Iraq War was notoriously very bloody, a lot of war crimes. At one point, the United States provided satellite intel allowing Iraq to gas and kill 11,000 Iranian troops. So basically, to give you an idea of that conflict, it was very bloody, and certainly Qasem Soleimani was guilty of some war crimes. Not a good individual. However, his relationship with the United States is still very complex. You could have a situation where, there was a situation where he's on the one hand funding and training Hezbollah in Lebanon to fight Israel, bad for the United States. Now, on the other hand, funding and training Shia militia groups in Afghanistan to fight ISIS, good thing for the U.S. So, very odd figure. However, he was also very adept at using social media, and he got into basically an Instagram war with Trump, throwing memes back and forth, and Trump didn't like him, and Trump wanted to kind of like start things with Iran. I mean, he did, but he surrounded himself with people that did. So it's not a surprise that eventually, there was some some tensions. But the point is,
do you think that Trump got lucky taking him out?
Got lucky taking him out?
Yeah.
Honestly, what I think happened, I think there was this war, this meme war between them. He doesn't like the guy,
right.
And a bunch of the people around him, who are more, not intelligent though, probably, but certainly more knowledgeable, led him to believe that this wasn't a big deal when it really was. And so when he was bombed, they were basically, I would assume they were around him telling him, this is going to be something like what happened when he killed, what was that latest terrorist leader that got executed. I don't think he thought it was a big deal.
Saddam Hussein?
No, most recently. It was like within the last 6 months.
Oh.
Regardless, I think they misled him, and I think they chronically mislead him. I think his impulse is to not get into all these wars. I think he wants to get out of them, but he surrounds himself with a bunch of neocons who kind of view him as a patsy, because he's impulsive. So if you can play his emotions right, they can get him to do whatever they want him to do.
And you're talking about Trump.
Yeah, talking about Trump.
Okay.
So I don't think he meant to do this. But the point is, I mean, they got him at the worst possible time, firstly, because he had just come back within the past year fighting ISIS and scoring major defeats against ISIS. There are pictures of him like shaking hands with like American military generals. So he's coming back a hero. There's tensions in Iran because of the sanctions. And
when you say coming back as a hero, you're talking about Trump or Soleimani?
Soleimani, because he was defeated ISIS in the field. So
right.
He came back to Iran as a hero. He wasn't involved in the domestic repression, so a lot of people view him as an apolitical actor, right? He goes to Saudi Arabia on a peace mission, it was revealed, between both Saudi Arabia and Iran to try to like lower tensions between the two countries. Gets assassinated, gets bombed, massive funeral, everybody's extremely upset.
Right.
And now we're still on the verge of war with Iran. Was not okay. He was viewed as somebody who could possibly, what's the dude's name? Possibly be the next leader of like Iran if something were to happen. He was almost viewed as a vice president type character.
Right.
Somebody who might replace Hassan Rouhani if something were to happen. So he was very well loved. He was politically important, and that's why we're now on the verge of war with Iran. Now it's de-escalated because of basically what happened was they had to respond, and they responded by basically telling Iraq, and in turn Iraq told American troops basically that there was going to be a bombing of a certain military installation, a couple, and there was, but they were like empty bases because they had been told hours prior that there was going to be an attack. Right. So they're trying to not kill Americans, but make an attack, and that's what they did. So then Trump recently said, we're going to increase sanctions, but, they backed down. And they did. But here's the deal, and anything I'll have to say on this topic, at least in terms of, setting facts down with this.
Right.
This isn't over, and we're still not out of the woods because he did de-escalate. That is, Hassan Rouhani did de-escalate and did, end up not killing Americans, which is great. We could de-escalate and not have a problem anymore. But senior military officials around him are not okay with this because they know what happened. He went back to his population and was like, look, we struck against the Americans. Everybody knows what happened. Military generals are not okay with it. There are rumors of a possible coup. Like 17 military officers were arrested. Not just officers, I don't know what their positions were, but 17 members of the Quds Force were arrested. And also, like, the Shia groups outside of Iran, it's not over. This guy was significant, and they're not done. So we don't know if there's going to be an attack, if there's going to be, like, some sort of, outside of Iran, some militia group attacking. So we could still very well have war with Iran. Okay. But it would appear to be de-escalating. So hopefully that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's scary, definitely.
So you think you do think it's scary?
Oh, like when you were talking about World War III, like obviously there's not going to be World War III, but we're seeing the lines being drawn. Like especially like immediately after this, not too long after this, Russia, China, and Iran basically got together and said, hey, we're going to start doing some joint military exercises, and that's frightening. And we are seeing the coalescence of a bunch of military forces, which were not necessarily acting as though they were going to be doing anything offensive anytime soon, begin to think, hey, maybe we should coordinate our efforts a little bit. Yeah. So World War III, no, but we're seeing the lines being drawn, and we have nukes.
And yet these lines have been there. They're just becoming more apparent.
More apparent, yeah, and coming together.
Right, right. Okay. All right, so when it comes to Iran and the Middle East, excuse me, and the tensions that are over there, do you ever sit around and think about, like, maybe from the Christian standpoint, how Christians are very, interested in what happens in the Middle East with Jerusalem and Israel and that. But it appears that Israel is not really the main, that's not the main issue here right now. This seems to be an American slash Iraq, Iranian, and Trump made it clear that we don't need anybody's oil, but that doesn't mean we won't take their oil.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, I mean, okay, that's fine, but so we are independent now. We can make our own, but that doesn't mean we won't take yours if it's for the taking. We're not going to just leave it for China and Russia to take. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
So some of this is at war, but this doesn't seem to, like when you look at that and you say there's Middle East conflict, even though Iraq and Iran are actually old Babylon from the scriptures all the way back to the 700 BC. I don't see it as that. I see this as a Western kind of Western war that has been going on in the eastern part of the world, the Middle East, and we either have a choice. We either get out or we continue to stay there, and if it continues to escalate, we're going to end up losing soldiers, and we're not going to win anything, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a natural tension between Iran and Israel, but yeah, this is not necessarily right now an Israel thing. This is a Western imperialism versus Eastern imperialism.
Okay, because it's not like we're over there protecting, right now, it's not like we're technically protecting Jerusalem or Israel from anything. So this seems to be more Western towards the whole Iran-Iraq conflict. Now, they have asked us to pull our troops out. As of today, I don't think we've pulled any troops out. I haven't heard anything. Have you heard anything?
No. Well, actually, there's a lot of interesting stuff there.
Okay.
Because especially with, we could, once again, we're trying not to make this a conversation about all the Middle East and all of our activities there.
Right.
But just recently with Iraq, we also, when Qasem Soleimani was assassinated, we also assassinated a top Iraqi military general. Mm-hmm. And they...
What was his name? Do you know?
No idea. No one's talking about it.
It was probably Lilam Sahamaham.
Lilam Sahamaham.
Every name is so hard. Do you ever notice Trump struggles to pronounce these names?
Well, I would struggle. I understand.
But you didn't struggle today. I mean, you did.
Well, yeah, I
said
the name a few times.
Have you been studying them today before?
A little bit.
You wanted to be prepped and ready.
I just wanted to make sure I said the names right. You know
so I'm thinking maybe you might be a good advisor to Donald Trump, because at least you could say, hey, Trump, you might want to practice these names before you actually go on, so that you're not going Qasem Soleimani.
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like if I was an advisor of Trump, I could influence him to do some far better things than he's doing right now. But yeah, I mean, who knows? But, where were we? Oh yeah, about the Iraq thing.
Yeah. Western war against Middle East.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is we were talking about taking troops out, and that dude we just killed, the Iraqi general, who unfortunately I don't know his name, but he was very important as well. And the Iraqi, basically their version of a Congress, basically they passed a resolution saying, "Hey, get out." And Trump responded by saying, "I'm going to put more troops in, and if you want us to get out, you have to pay us for our military bases." Yeah. Basically saying, screw you, we're going to stay in there. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, yeah.
And then even Canada got on board, and they sent, 3,000 troops to Kuwait?
I didn't even know that, did they?
Well, I mean, you can look it up, make sure you verify it, but I'm pretty sure.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they sent 3,000 to Kuwait as a backup help.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that this whole situation, it's not even like... Not to say that under any circumstances that military conflict is good or necessary, but at least with Israel and the area around Gaza, I understand why. It's like that's a very significant religious area.
Right.
This right now doesn't even. We don't. American military figures and political figures for a while had wanted to overthrow Iran for their own purposes, for oil, for regional control. But this right now isn't even. This first and foremost in form as what's happening right now. This is just a bunch of meathead guys with guns. Killing each other over memes, you know what I mean? There are obviously broader political implications and people behind the scenes who want to overthrow Iran because of all the political, economic benefits whatsoever, whatever that involves. But right now, it's Trump getting mad at a dude because of an Instagram war he had killing him, basically. No, but that was his motivation.
Well, that's what I'm going to. That's what I'm going to want to ask you. So at the end of the day, after all of your research, everything you've looked at, everything you've watched, and of course, you can watch 100 videos and get 100 different angles of what things are. After all that, you think you believe, and I'm not saying yes or no because I don't really have an opinion on this. You believe that this attack on Soleimani, in which he was killed, all stemmed from Donald Trump and him having a tweet war on Twitter, and Trump getting upset, going, "I need to kill that guy."
Dude, honestly, that's what it boils out with Trump. I mean, there's a lot of background.
Okay.
You know what I mean, a lot of people behind the scenes that are using that to their advantage. But when it comes down to it, yeah, I guarantee you, Trump did not know this guy's name until that Instagram war happened. He got mad at him. They started talking about him as a figure and influenced him so that they're like, oh yeah, I mean, if this guy's a bad guy, we could take this guy out, and led him to believe that it wouldn't be a big deal. And then they got their war with Iran. Okay. They're probably pretty mad because somehow there's no war, at least not yet.
So you don't think there's anybody advising Trump going, listen, I know you and Solly had a little problem on the court the other day when you were playing basketball. I know he shoved you and stuff like that. But seriously, this is going to be a problem if we bomb them and take him out. Because obviously Trump can't just walk in the war room and go, as president, he can't just push a button and go, all right, that has to go through a whole lot of stuff. A whole lot of stuff has to happen before a bomb is dropped somewhere.
Yeah, but you also, I feel what you're saying, and I think there are people advising him. It's not like they're like, oh, everything's going to be fine. Even he wouldn't be like, oh, everything will be fine.
So do you think he had an administration or a bunch of people that were just waiting for him to give the cue to press the button?
I think if you want to do the least speculation possible and just draw conclusions from the most basic facts, he's surrounded by neocons. And he's somebody who doesn't want war, or at least he says he doesn't want war. So what I think happened is whatever they told him, however truthful it was or wasn't, I think there are a bunch of people pushing him to say, even if it was accurate, even if they did tell him, this could lead to war, I think there are a lot of people who are like, misled him a bit.
Okay, can you explain neocon?
Oh, neocon means neoconservative. I mean, honestly, basically, breaking down neoconservative ideology, you can talk for a while, there's economic policy, there's social policy, but generally when I say neocon, it's to refer to the difference between neocon and neoliberal, the difference being neocons are a lot more hawkish and a lot more about hard power, which is going into a region and controlling it militarily, while neoliberals, externally, when we're talking about external policy, talking about international things, are more about soft power that is gaining diplomatic control through various means. Okay. They're both snakes, they just have different tactics.
And yet, if you would have caught Tucker Carlson, if you would have caught his show just the other night, I think it was.
He was not in favor of this. Yeah, he was.
Well, he also brought up the whole idea that back in, I don't know, was it in the late 80s or whatever, maybe early 90s, when Hillary started thinking about running for office and certain things, and he just showed clips of her saying, pretty much, if Iran doesn't do what we say, we're pretty much going to wipe them off. And she even said that. She said, we will obliterate them. That's one of the phrases that she said.
Oh, yeah.
So she would be a neoliberal. She would be a liberalist type of person. And yet she, so here's my issue. You're saying that the Liberal Party is usually more about diplomacy and those kind of things, and the neoconservatives are more about let's just drop a bomb and finish it, right?
Oh, but they'll launch missiles.
But they will.
That's the thing.
So I think it's all rhetoric. I think it's just all talk, because at the end of the day, I think everybody, whether you're a liberal or a conservative, if you're in the White House and you have power, at the end of the day, that power corrupts. And what they're looking for is, I'm going to be the biggest person on the playground, which means then that everybody does what I say.
Remember what I said earlier? I mean, I briefly called them snakes. Yeah, dude, they're evil people who don't value human life, who are willing to end it if necessary. They might have different inclinations. Hillary Clinton might now say, I'd much rather do this. But yeah, she's talked about wiping countries off the face of the earth. We know, because she admitted as much, she didn't know she was being recorded, but she's talking about subjugating Palestinian democracy, basically saying, yeah, we can let them have democracy, but let's make sure we get in the leader we want. Let's influence them in various ways. These people, and the establishment left and the establishment right, are, hear me now and quote me later, they're evil people, and they need to be stopped. And that's why when I see people like Trump, he's a meathead, he's a moron in my opinion. I can say a lot of things about Trump, but I think he did have this legitimate inclination where he's like, can we get out of all these wars? And he's held that position for a while, and I think the reason why we're not is because doesn't have a political ideology, he's not very versed in a lot of things, and they can lead him wherever they want to lead him. But yeah, Hillary Clinton, John Bolton, anybody in the establishment Democratic Party, Republican Party, generally speaking generally, are snakes, and they have to be removed from office, stopped by whatever means necessary.
Okay. So you're also saying then that Trump, although he talks like he's independent of all of this political power struggle that's going on in the White House, he's influenced by it more than what most people think.
I just think
controlled by it.
Yeah, I just think he doesn't have an idea. He's like a lost child. He doesn't know what to do, and they're using him, despite the fact that he does have, I think, some positive inclinations. Okay. When he said he was going to bring the jobs back, he meant that, and he wanted to do that.
Right.
But international capital.
And I think about stopping these wars and bringing the troops home. I think he meant that too.
Oh, absolutely. But
he just hasn't been accomplished.
Yeah. Because he's surrounded himself with people who want war.
Right. Okay, well, that's good stuff. So that brings us back to maybe our next topic. And, of course, if you want to chime in on Facebook or on YouTube, feel free to ask questions or give thoughts, and we'll try to get to those. And also, if you're on YouTube, or if not, you can go to our YouTube channel, TheNorthEasttube, and you can click on our video, and as you're watching it, on the right-hand corner, you can subscribe to our videos, and then you can get updates when our videos are coming on. So that leads me to kind of maybe our next thought. So let's get out of Iran at least a little bit, because something that you and I were talking about the other day when we were on our way to Boardman, and that's this, that, okay, so we just talked about trigger-happy people and power struggles, and how at the end of the day the power establishment just says, hey, I want to be the big person on the playground so I can control everything and do everything. And part of that comes to greed, and part of that comes to power that corrupts people. However, there is a point in time when the leaders have to make decisions, and sometimes those decisions may very well be that if there is a person in power, or there is a government that is acting in a way that is degrading a society or putting people in a really bad spot, that we can either at least diplomatically do that, or if it comes to it, we could say, hey, we need to assassinate or drop a bomb. And you and I talked a little bit about that, and we said, well, would God be okay with that? And I said that in the Scriptures, we see that throughout the Scriptures, that there were often times where God even used His people to take out other countries that were worshiping idols, that were sacrificing children to the god of Molech. And so God does not do that, though. He doesn't do that flippantly. He doesn't just say, hey, I got a bad tweet from this guy, so let's go bomb him. That's not how God acts. But He warns, and He goes after people, and if they don't listen, eventually the consequence comes. And not only on other countries, but Israel saw that happen to themselves over and over and over again. God would say to Israel, listen, if you follow me, then I will take care of you, I will provide for you. But they decided to worship other idols, and they decided to go their own way and live in a way that was disobedient to God. And then God brought in military forces outside of Israel, and He took them into slavery and captivity to show them that, listen, if you want to try to live life on your own without me, then this is kind of the consequence of that, and that's what's going to happen. So, with that said, then let's get out of Iran, or Iran, however you want to say it, and let's come back to the United States. We're now at 2020, and I just probably, last week, my nephew Brandon showed me a video that was aired in October on national television. I don't know whether it's continuing to be aired. I don't know if anybody has complained about it, but it literally was a commercial for tampons for men. And when he showed me this video, I was like, "What? You got to be kidding me!" I mean, there's literally a scene where a young boy comes to his dad in the kitchen and says, "Dad, I think I got my, my thing." And so, since who knows who's watching? If kids watch, whatever, I'm not going to go into depth. And then there was another high school kid. There's another scene with a high school kid. He's getting his books out of his locker, and a few feminine hygiene products fall out of his locker, and a girl helps him pick it up, and oh, thank you. And it's like, this is a normal thing now. And so so and I know if it wasn't so idiotic, it would almost be sad. But it's like there's almost like a humor in it where you got to laugh, but there's something that says, where have we come to?
Something that's weird about it.
Yeah, I mean, where have we come to? And I showed you that video just to get your reactions.
I haven't been right since you showed me that.
You have not been right since I showed you that? Okay.
Yeah, no, but seriously, man, that was absurd. It took me we watched the entire video, and then I asked out loud. I was like, "What were they even advertising? What was that commercial about?" And apparently, it was for tampons, but it just made no sense. It was the strangest commercial I've ever seen.
Right.
I was shocked that it aired.
Right.
And yeah, when what was it? We'll go back to that first comment on the video. And the guy's like, my family wonders why I just want to take all my children and go out to the woods. The society's collapsing. Yeah. But no, it really is. That's
that was a comment of someone that watched the commercial. Yeah.
And I sympathize. I understand. And
right.
yeah, I don't understand why they did that. I think it's weird, and I think it does. There is an issue of this feminizing of males, and okay, so I'm of the left, right?
Right.
And this social phenomena where people have a tendency to do that comes from the left. And to a degree, I understand the sort of sentiment. There was this documentary I was watching, and it was about the Weather Underground. You know who the Weather Underground are?
I do not.
They were this group.
Okay, go ahead.
Briefly, they were this group from the 60s and 70s, and they bombed a bunch of places. They would tell people before anything happened. They'd remove, people there. They never killed anybody. But they would bomb a bunch of places, and they were, of the radical left. They called themselves communists. Didn't do much. They didn't succeed, and eventually they were prosecuted. Got off because the FBI used illegal methods. Regardless, there was this one dude who at one point in the documentary was talking about how there had been these people saying we need to feminize America. Basically, we need to feminize people. And he was coming from, when he said that, and when he kind of agreed with that statement, he was coming from a position where it's what they mean is there's this tendency amongst males to be hyper-aggressive, to be, hyper-authoritative, and to basically force the issue in ways that do not benefit people. And from that perspective, I understand things, but I think the broader left has gotten to this point, socially speaking, where they try to feminize a group which can't be feminized, and that's males. You know what I mean? I understand that there is such a thing as toxic masculinity. You know what I mean? You can do things and have them not be right, and have them be needlessly violent. You know what I mean? Right. There is this impulse that has to be curbed, but at the same time, you have to understand, guys are going to be guys. And when you do things like run commercials about, guys this metaphor, this world that doesn't exist where, guys have periods, what are you trying to accomplish? All you're going to do is make people... A lot of people say, this is absurd. You're trying to feminize males. This is possibly demonic. You know what I mean? Right. And you're going to make a lot of people who otherwise would grant your point and say, you know what, yeah, if anybody has that tendency to act irrationally and act, hyper-aggressively, it's going to be males. And then you turn into a thing where no, you're attacking their very masculinity and trying to feminize them. And people aren't cool with that. So that's an absurd commercial, and it makes the entire left look absolutely insane.
Right. Now,
we make ourselves look, insane in a lot of cases socially, but I think there is a lot of truth in the left when it comes to economic issues, when it comes to issues of foreign policy, and on some social issues, though, the left has gone way too far in a lot of instances.
I agree. So here's my first thought as we're walking through this today, and that is this: that there is a leftist position that does not like any men, whether it's Trump or who it is, making decisions, period. Whether it's decisions to drop a bomb on a country or whether it's a decision to create new jobs, whatever it is. There's this thing against that. So obviously then you even see in the Democratic Party now, we're coming up to the elections here in November, and some people are saying that maybe Michelle Obama is going to jump in. Some people are saying that Hillary's going to jump back in, although I did hear that Hillary,
God forbid.
I heard she became a chancellor at some college in some other country.
Chancellor?
Chancellor of a college somewhere. You can look that up and find it out.
You want me?
Yeah, you could. But whether she'll come back in or not. But the idea here is that in feminizing America, for instance, I don't know how long that commercial ran or even how often it ran, because I don't watch regular TV very little. And I don't get a lot of time to do that anyway, but if I do get time, maybe I'll watch a video or something like that. But who in their right mind would think that biologically that any male, like we have come to a place where it is absurd that we are even entertaining the thoughts of anybody who will say that a man who is a biological man can have a menstrual cycle, and that we would even have commercials for that or promote something like that. Now, I understand that there are a lot of hormonal therapies and there are a lot of surgeries that are being done to try to accomplish these kinds of things. I get all that, but at the end of the day, you come back to the drawing board and you say, when an individual is born and they come out with certain features, a certain nature about them, they are either male or female. And in that very, very small percentage, yes, there are deformities where we do have people that come out and they have either both parts or one part missing or however that whole thing works. However, even those people still identify with either the male traits or the female traits as far as the nature. And I think what we're getting into here is, and I've heard different people talk about this, is that people are starting to try and promote the idea that we don't have a nature anymore. Like human beings don't even have a nature. So pretty soon I can identify with a squirrel, because let's face it, here's the nature of a squirrel. A squirrel likes to collect nuts. They hold them in their cheeks. They go and they take them in the wintertime and they climb trees and they play and they jump on branches and they do all that kind of stuff. That would be part of the definition or the description of the nature of a squirrel, okay? It has really light bones and a light body to be able to do this. That's the nature of a squirrel. Now, all of a sudden, if we want to say, well, that's not a squirrel anymore, or I want to go, I'm a squirrel, well, now all of a sudden we are talking irrational, because you cannot take on the nature of a squirrel when you weigh 200 pounds and you cannot climb trees. You don't harvest nuts and go hide them for your dinner. So now we're losing our sense of who we are, identity.
Well, I might have to ruin your day. That's a thing, right? I mean, not necessarily with squirrels, but there are people. You ever heard of otherkin?
I have.
That identify as like animals. There's some crazy stuff out there.
But that's the whole point, though. Like, okay, if they're identifying as those animals, what in our mind has caused us to even to even give attention to any of that kind of thought, and even let that thought come to a discussion table? Because unless, of course, as people we're saying, okay, you don't have a nature, I don't have a nature, everything's just whatever it wants to be, and so if I want to be a squirrel, I can be a squirrel. Everything is going off the deep end as far as there's no rational thought anymore. And I bring this back to not just the feminizing of men in America, but even religious thought. Like, people don't seem to think rationally about religion, in my mind, either. And we can talk about that in a little bit. So let's get back to the feminizing of America then. So we're not just looking at trying to make men more feminine. We're trying to actually take away, I think we're trying to take away the nature of the human being, period.
Define that.
So for instance,
we're talking about like the animal stuff.
So I can identify with whatever I want to be. So it looks like feminizing men here in America, it does have its own agenda. But I think as a whole, the world is trying to take away the idea of human beings as having an actual nature to them.
It's having like sexes, genders.
Exactly. Or even just being human. Like, what does it mean to be human? If you were going to answer the question, what does it mean to be human? You would start to answer that and you would say, well, being human is... And you might think about the physical part, but then you also might think of, I have a mind and I can think, and I have emotions that I can feel with, and I can exhibit love, and some of those attributes, yes, can be a part of the animal kingdom as well. I totally get that and understand that. But there is a distinction in the nature of a human being. And then once you finally get the nature of a human being, now all of a sudden that then divides itself into some subtopics, like a human being who is a female would identify. This would be the nature of a female. But now all of a sudden we're trying to take those natures and we're trying to blur them, or we're trying to make them look like they don't exist anymore. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to tackle there. Trying to tackle them individually. I mean, when speaking purely about like sex and gender, I mean that's been throughout human history, like you were talking about, various terms. Throughout human history, there are people who have existed in that state where it's like, well, I don't even know what I am, or people that are transgender. That's existed for a while. But I mean, in recent years, in recent decades, if you want to talk about history of human civilization, there has been a resurgence in kind of like these people who want to abolish gender, or otherwise want to there are people who say, oh, there are 6 genders, there are 10 genders, there are millions of genders, blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
I think the point is that there are obviously 2 genders, in that there are 2 sexes, and from the beginning of humans existing, there's been male, there's been female, there's been the masculine, there's been the feminine. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think if you refuse to acknowledge that as something that is, on its face, it's a social construct, but it obviously existed independent of, it existed before, and humans decided to make a social construct of it. There's obviously, I think, from the get-go, a masculine and a feminine, and I think if you acknowledge that, you can be in the conversation. If you don't acknowledge that, I think you're fooling yourself.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can kind of sympathize in that I can understand, the LGBTQ, plus community. You know what I mean? These are communities that I can understand and respect, but I think they have to also understand that, like, there is a masculine and a feminine, and that these 2 genders exist. And when you get to the point where you're like trying to abolish gender or trying to make it seem like it doesn't exist, that's a fight you're not going to win, and you're just going to look absurd.
See, that's it. I will I don't necessarily respect their arguments. I will respect them as people.
As people. Yeah.
But I still don't understand. Like, I don't understand where the irrational thought is coming from. Like, just something as simple as, like, we're off the charts now as far as a commercial that tries to say that men can have menstrual cycles.
Well, here's the thing. I think they were trying to make some sort of stupid symbolic point.
I imagine they were. I imagine they were.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, this whole feminizing thing, if you go back, I just want to bring up this book. I don't have it. I can't seem to pull it up for everybody, but there's a new book that's coming out in February. It's called What Men Want to Say to Women But Can't. It's by Denise McAllister. I just saw an interview of her on the Eric Metaxas show yesterday, and I don't know if it aired yesterday or when it pulled up. But just to get her take on it, just to give you a quick background, and she talks in this book about how the world has been feminizing men for a while now, and so what's happened is that over time, because the feminist movement could not get the power that they wanted or the things they wanted, because, see, the idea is that we want everything to be equal, but then equal turns out to be, no, we want everything that they have. So you want equal rights. So, for instance, if I have an equal right, the same equal right as you to vote, but your vote, for some reason, I feel like your vote gets more weight than mine. Well, then that obviously is going to upset me, and so now I don't just want the equal opportunity to vote. Now I want to make sure that your vote looks like my vote. I want power now. And so when the feminist movement realized they couldn't do that with the men, so they're equal, they have equal opportunities now, but the men are still, for whatever reason, getting things they want. So now they say the way we're going to take this down is we're going to start to feminize men. And they've done that. Like, I don't know if you remember, there was, I think, a Gillette commercial that came out here last year, really trying to kind of feminize men. Did you see the commercial or any of?
I probably have, but I don't remember.
So it's everywhere, and they're trying to do that. So, if you're looking at this as a man, what's going to happen in 2020? Like, what's the next thing you see as far as young people on the campus, Youngstown State or any campus? What are you gonna start seeing? I mean, are you gonna start seeing guys say, listen, I know I'm a man, but I can't make a decision on whether it's right or wrong to have ice cream. Because that person over there doesn't have any ice cream. They're eating chicken fingers, but I'm not sure if I could eat ice cream, because if they don't have ice cream, I might just feel like I'm not, I'm kind of against them, or I don't.
Are you talking like? What are we talking about here?
Like if you're on the college campus of Youngstown State, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And this person here, who maybe is a male, and they have a meal plan that has, all the fixings, and maybe there's a young lady over here and she's just eating her, vegan whatever, or her vegan salad. This guy now can't ever feel like he can just eat his ice cream, because all of a sudden now this girl over here, she can't have ice cream, or she doesn't get to have ice cream because she doesn't have a meal plan. So the idea is that there is this movement to say that everybody needs to be able to have ice cream if they want it, and you should feel bad if you're eating the ice cream and that person over there can't have ice cream. In my opinion, technically, that girl's better off because she's eating something healthy for her instead of the ice cream. But do you see what I'm getting at? Like, they're not just trying to feminize men. It's still a back-end way of trying. It's a Marxist or a communistic way.
It's a Marxist plot.
It's a Marxist plot.
Turn the frogs gay.
To make men kind of subservient to the ideas, so that the whole of population says, unless everybody has the same stuff, unless everybody has everything, it's all the same across the board, you should feel guilty if you have anything. And this is gonna launch us into our next topic too, eventually here. But
I was gonna say there's a lot of stuff to cover there, not a whole lot of time. I guess I'll just say simply how I think 2020 is going to be and how I see these social phenomena progressing.
Okay.
I think in terms of the gender thing and the transgender thing and all that sort of stuff, I think we're in a period of social upheaval around those issues.
Okay.
And it's going to calm down because there are things that are going to be accepted, things like the LGBTQ community, things like transgenderism, all that type of stuff. That's going to become mainstream.
Oh, it's already mainstream,
well,
right?
Even more mainstream. Yeah.
Okay.
And at that point, a lot of the stuff that you're seeing is going to die down. So these people, it's not a counterculture; it's a subculture. It's trying to assert itself to a greater extent. So I think it's one of these things where, in saying they exist and asserting their existence, they're trying to a certain degree, impose their existence on the broader population, and that's why you're seeing this conflict. I think that's going to die down with time. So I think we've seen the worst of it. I don't think it's going to get much worse. I think it's going to get better. There's going to be some harmony. In terms of when we kind of dipped into talking about ice cream and talking about haves and have-nots.
Right.
In terms of economic stuff, I think that's going to accelerate. I think, what we've seen in the past 4 years, 8 years, past decade, is we're seeing an American population that understands they don't have control over a whole lot. Everybody knew Hillary Clinton was going to get the presidency, but she didn't. And she didn't because the American people wanted to try to throw a Molotov cocktail through, the house window of the establishment. They wanted to burn it all down, and Trump was a way of burning it down. Who is one of the most popular Democratic candidates running right now? Bernie Sanders, because he's running on a message of, listen, the top 1% own 90% of the wealth.
He's getting tired though.
Oh yeah,
He's like not showing up to events and stuff.
Well,
right?
he had a heart attack. Yeah, he's slowing down definitely. But the point is, if you look at these different candidates and you look at the way things are going, you have an American population that wants an outsider, wants a revolution of sorts. And I think in terms of when we talk about haves and have-nots, there's going to be a broader distribution of wealth. There's going to be riots. There's going to be violence. So I think the social aspect, you're going to see that dying down. We're seeing the worst of it. And honestly, that was the byproduct of Democratic Party, which doesn't want to focus on economic issues. And so instead, they've seen the successes they've had, like with the civil rights movement and social issues. So they want to push that as far as they can because, like Martin Luther King said, it didn't cost a dime to integrate a lunch counter. And similarly, it doesn't cost a dime to talk about how, you're evil if you are not okay with, or don't have religious beliefs that make it so that you disagree with somebody who is, say, homosexual. You know what I mean? They want to push that as far as it can go to the point where they're hurting people who are, otherwise good people who just have religious differences. But I'm going on a tangent. The point is, you're going to see that dying down because people are going to start focusing on economic issues, and that is still to come. And that's where you start to get into issues of greed and issues of wealth concentration.
Right. And so when you do start to talk about the economic issues, though, then here's the issue: the leftist party and the people who are feminized in America and who are doing these things, they want people to feel guilty if they have something. Right?
I don't think you should feel guilty. I think there is a little bit of that going on, and I don't think you should feel guilty if you have something.
Okay,
there are plenty of people that have something. It's about having so much control that you own, you have control over a nation disproportionately, or having so much money that instead of earning your keep, of earning your money begins to manufacture more money for you. But that's... Yeah,
okay, so we could talk about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
We could a little bit, yeah.
Just a little bit.
So so I'm not going to feel... If, for instance, if I buy a $4 thing of organic broccoli at Walmart, and I see someone come up and they buy a $2 conventional thing of broccoli, I'm not going to feel bad. Because number one, they might have more money than I do anyway, and even if they don't, that's just their choice. That's the choice that they make. But again, this is where equality comes from. We have equal opportunity to buy the organic or the conventional.
Yeah, of course.
All right?
Yeah.
But for some reason, there seems to be this push. And you said you think it's going to die down. I think it's going to ramp up.
The social aspect.
You think the social aspect is going to die down?
I'm sorry. I was talking about social issues.
Okay.
Not yet. I think the economic stuff, morally, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's going to ramp up.
All right. But as the economic ramps up, I think the social is going to come in, and then it's just going to come right behind it and push it even further. Because what's going to happen then is that all of a sudden, this guy who chooses to buy the organic, you know what? He shouldn't be allowed to do that. Everybody should have the organic, whether they choose to or not. You know, it's not going to be a question of. And so then, correct me if I'm wrong. Then that becomes communism, because now you don't have a choice. You will be told what you can buy and what you can't buy.
Let me go to my
all right, go to your notes.
My Lenin literature.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Where's it at?
He who buys organic broccoli.
Yeah.
Is bourgeois scum.
Uh-huh.
And must be that is what Lenin. No, I'm joking.
All right.
But no, that's the thing is I don't think in terms of it's. I don't know where to begin.
Have I made this too simple, or is
a little bit? Well, here's the thing about who cares if you want to buy the organic broccoli or don't want to buy the organic broccoli?
We don't care. But eventually, if a society is going to dictate how everybody gets what they get, then you're not going to have a choice one day.
I would submit to you that when Lenin and his band of socialists were trying to overthrow the Tsar, it wasn't because they wanted to abolish the choice between different strains of broccoli. Well, here's the thing: we started off talking about broccoli, and so to get to talking about the social aspect of people being ashamed for maybe buying this brand of broccoli because it's high end,
right,
versus going all the way up to, or not even up or down, but going to communist theory. Very, 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 very separate. Can we talk in the briefest of terms about communist theory?
Yeah, let's do it.
Briefly, very briefly. The cornerstone of Marxism, the cornerstone of communism in terms of thought, is something called dialectical materialism. There was this.
You gave me a book on that.
Yeah.
I still have the book
by Joseph Stalin.
Yeah.
There was this thinker called William Hegel, Georg. I don't know what his name fully was, but basically Hegel. This guy created a sort of methodology of thinking called dialect. It's basically where, in any situation, you try to look at conflicting forces, called the thesis, the antithesis, and then look at the ways in which they interact with each other and make the synthesis. Okay, so it's basically a strand of thought where you try to identify two conflicting forces and identify how they'll change and react with each other, called the dialect. Materialism is basically the idea that material conditions, your surroundings, your environment, inform your ideology and not the other way around. Okay. So that's the cornerstone of Marxism. And once again, this is something you can spend 2 hours talking about, so it's hard to try to sum up communism, but basically it's the idea that through the progression of history, human implements and the means of production have influenced the relations between men, how we view each other and who is subordinate and who is superior and things like that. And that as the methods of production, means of production...
Okay, go ahead.
Go on.
No, go ahead.
As the means of production have changed, the means of production have at various points been out of line with the relations between humans. So there's been, slavery. But as the means of production marched forward, slavery morphed into feudalism, and feudalism morphed into capitalism. And basically, the next incarnation, people believe, will be the rise of a social era, a socioeconomic system, where the means of production, instead of being owned traditionally by one person, a few people, a group of people, corporations, regardless, will eventually evolve to a point in time where it's communally owned, and where basically everybody has a say in, producing things and how it's distributed. I could talk for 10 hours talking about.
I know you
Lenin
could.
and all
I know
that
you
stuff.
could.
But yeah, that's basically what communism
And
is.
we're already
Yeah.
at 11 o'clock.
Are we actually? We need to move off this immediately. We'll talk about Marxism later. We do have one more topic, don't we?
Yeah, but what you were talking about, I think, leads into this whole thing. And so the last thing we're going to talk about today, and we'll just go a few minutes over because we started just a couple minutes late. But like what you were talking about, I think stems from. So, for instance, you jumped into like slavery, how that was produced, and then slavery produced. You say feudalism,
and
so
capitalism.
Into capitalism. Okay. But don't you see that though as not a problem with men being men and men using the quality traits that they've been given by God to lead and be strong and to provide and to cultivate things and to develop things and to create things.
It's not a male problem.
Okay, so it's not.
It's a human problem.
It's a human problem, and I think it's a sin problem.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is, it's a sin problem. But I mean, there are ways to.
Meaning we've missed the mark. So that video that I sent you the other day, the idea of sin in the Bible is the Greek word harmatia, means that I've missed a mark. So for instance, I have a gun and I'm going to try to hit the camera there and I miss it. Well, that would be considered sin. So I think human beings have missed the mark in that they have allowed their desires for stuff to be the forefront of how they live and how they feel that's who they are as a person. So, for instance, if I'm going to identify as a woman, I have a certain idea about what a woman should be, and if it's not there, then I feel like I'm not who I should be, and so then that means that maybe I'll do something that I shouldn't do just to be that woman, that I feel like I should be. So I'll go out and get plastic surgery, or I'll do this, and so it's centered around this kind of this perversion that there was a God who created us, male and female, and then He gave us this call to worship Him and to honor Him, and then to live in a way where He shows us and develops us and teaches us how to treat one another relationally. And so because people have allowed stuff to get in the way, they've lost their sight of God and His kingdom, and now all of a sudden we are living in a world, and I don't care who you get in the White House, you could put a communist in the White House, there's still going to be the same problem, because the communist has the same issue as the capitalist, and that is that we have all been taken under this spell of greed. And the reason I use the word greed is because we've just started a series on Sunday mornings entitled Be Ready, and it's out of Luke chapter 12, and whether people want to admit it or not, there is an end coming. Maybe not an end to our over 200 years of republic or capitalistic society, but there's an end coming to all of this. God tells us in His Word that one day He's going to put an end to all of this stuff, and there will be a new kingdom and a new earth, and everything will be restored the way it was supposed to be. But be ready for what? And the first thing there in Luke chapter 12, when He talks about this being ready, He says, be ready and on your guard against every form of greed. And so then as He's talking about that, he talks about how people pretty much just focus on stuff. And Jesus said, you're not supposed to be concerned about stuff. You're supposed to be concerned about the souls of other people. That's where your life should be. So if I really cared about you, does that mean then that I'm going to make sure you have everything I have? Or does that mean that I'm going to care more about your soul and the things of a spiritual nature? And you know what? I'm not really concerned. Like, as long as you have food to eat and shelter and those kind of things, that's okay. You may not have a dirt bike, and I might have a dirt bike. But if you want to ride the dirt bike, I'd be cool with you riding the dirt bike.
As long as I ensure that you're not dying as a human, and that I'm treating you with basic kindness, and that I'm looking out for you.
Right.
I'm doing my work as far as God's concerned. Yeah.
Right. And then one day I might have some extra money, and I go, you know what? Garrett's always over here riding my dirt bike. I'm going to buy him a dirt bike.
Yeah.
But see, that comes from God. That doesn't come from a political or even an ideological type of. I don't even know what the word for it.
Yeah. We're at a level where we're talking about, social relations between people. So, your decision to be like, again, this is a metaphorical situation. This is, non-existent. But I mean, your relation with another human being, where you're like, I have this much money and they have less, but I'm going to decide based on my relationship with God and my relationship with this person, how we interact and how I'm going to deal with this person.
Right.
And maybe one day I'll buy him a dirt bike, whatever. Yeah, that's something that's between you and God, and how you spend your money. That's entirely between you, God, your spouse, whoever.
Right, but a Marxist society, that's what I'm saying. Marxist, even capitalism doesn't necessarily fix that.
Yeah, but Marx has nothing to say about that. We're talking.
But he does have something to say about the haves and the have-nots, and how eventually the have-nots have to, if it's going to be a fair society, they have to have what the haves have.
Well, yeah, here's the thing. I mean,
and that's not necessarily true, because if you got a have and you've got a have-not, and that have is treating that have-not with respect and honor as a human being the way God expected them, that society is going to be a great society.
I would agree.
The problem is,
does that never happen?
No, but the problem is because of this word greed that we're talking about, and everybody has that deep down inside, and unless God changes that in their life, then that's not going to change. So you do have people in capitalistic societies who are philanthropists, who like to help people and do a lot of good things. And some of them are Christian, some of them are not Christian, some of them are still greedy, even though they help people. They only help people at the end of the year because that helps them give tax write-off, and so they're considered philanthropists. I get all that. But at the end of the day, I don't think there's anything that's going to fix the world other than God's economy. God's political standard. And the political standard is this: stop being concerned about your stuff and start living in a kingdom that is according to how God designed the kingdom, and that is to respect and to love and honor one another as human beings, and look out for your best interests even more than I look out for my own best interest. But that doesn't mean, like if you go back and look at Luke chapter 12, that doesn't mean I shouldn't have an abundance.
Yeah. And listen, two things. In a communist society, I mean, communism is... There's socialists and communists. Communist is technically more of an abstract concept, like absolute zero. But regardless, if you were living under a communist socialist society, regardless, I keep saying that word, there will be haves and have-nots.
What word? Regardless?
Regardless.
All right, let's try again. Regardless.
There will be haves and have-nots. But I mean, that's going to happen, and whether or not somebody has more abundance than somebody else, like Lenin, Marx, and nobody really speaks to that, because it's speaking more broadly about a system. Speaking more broadly about a system, like we just were talking about that, I would grant your point that if everybody was godly, if every person knew how to love God and love people, then whatever the form a system takes, whether it's technically slavery, whether it's feudalism, capitalism, or communism, I think if everybody was godly, all our problems would be solved, at least speaking in terms of how we organize society, and people just treating others kindly, and things being good. That's not going to happen. So I think the question we're asking is, given the fact...
It will happen.
Well, it will happen, but when that happens, you know what I mean? We won't have to talk about human civilization.
No, we won't.
So I guess what I'm saying is, and once again, I'm not doing the best job of speaking about communism and describing it, but I will say, as broad as I can, that I think the goal is to understand that as long as humans are going to be selfish and greedy and unkind and ungodly, as long as we're talking about a human society where that's going to happen, I think the best we can do is design a system that curbs our worst impulses. And if we were living under slavery, I think that gives full reign to some of the worst things people are willing to do. Under capitalism, it's better. Under feudalism, it's better. And I think we can reach a system where we can do the least damage as people to each other.
Okay. But how are you going to curb an impulse that everyone has, like greed? How are you going to curb that impulse by giving people stuff? Because that's
not how you curb.
That's part of the issue.
That is part of
But that's what people want.
That is what people want. But I think there's a difference between, like, if you had a candidate that's like, oh, I'm going to give everybody, $2,000.
Right.
I mean, there is such a thing as vote buying.
Yang is his last name,
Andrew
right?
Yang, yeah. But I think I grant your point. But if you are talking more ideologically about a system that gives people power, about a system that fights against the current state of affairs, where you have the bottom 50% of society owning less than 1% of that society's total wealth, I think when you're talking very broadly about a system that disenfranchises so many people, and you talk about ending that system, I think there's a lot of good in that. I think that is the way we should go, politically speaking. Now, is there such a thing as basically just feeding, the masses, just basically saying, I'll give you this if you support me? Yeah, there is such a thing, but I think as of right now, people are just talking as broad as they possibly can about fixing a system that is so blatantly unequal and has horrible outcomes for people in America, and we're worldwide, we're in the top 1% in terms of wealth, just Americans.
Right.
You look at places that, people live on less than $1 a day. Those people are suffering. Those people are dying not unnatural deaths, but I mean, they're dying at incredibly young ages. Like, I think in Brazil, 20% of children below the age of 5, they don't make it past their 5th birthday. There's extreme poverty and extreme inequality, and I think worldwide that needs to be solved. In America, that needs to be solved, and I think it can be solved.
Sure, it can.
But yeah, I think so. I think if you want to fix people's problems, making everybody godly would fix it all. But in the meanwhile, we need to talk about political structures which make us hurt each other as least possible.
And see, that's where I think, like you say, in the meanwhile, like, to me, then there's no hope. Like, if people out there, I don't care whether you're Republican or Democrat or communist or Marxist, if you're just going to say, it would be good that everybody's godly, but in the meanwhile, then there's no hope as far as I'm concerned. And the reason I say that is because even the people who are saying, okay, I just want to solve poverty everywhere. I just want to solve poverty. At the end of the day, those people will start to solve the poverty, but then they still move towards the greed issue. And then the people that are now out of poverty are starting to see that, oh, I could have that and I want that. And now the issue is, why can't we teach people, why can't we creatively find ways and call on God to ask us how to help people learn how to work with their hands, how to help people learn how to create things, and not necessarily create for the purpose of making a lot of money, but to do things to actually better the human race, to actually love people and care for people the way that we're supposed to love and care for them. That's the nature of God. Like, when God created everything and he said, oh, everything is very good. Genesis chapter 1, he creates everything. And then he tells Adam and Eve, he says, I have given you dominion over the animals, all the things that creep on the earth, and I've given you dominion over them, so rule over them. And what's interesting is when people hear that word rule or dominion, automatically this power thing comes into their mind that says, now I have complete control. I can do all of this stuff for me, to satisfy me. And if you think about it, when you go back and look at the creation story, everything God created had nothing to do for himself. It had everything to do for creation. He was there to serve creation. And even later on with Adam and Eve, his constant demeanor is towards human beings is, I'm here to serve you. I'm here to love you. I'm here to help you. And yet, when we get this word rule or dominion set before our name, I'm now the ruler. It's just like that in church, too. People have the pastor. And so everybody comes to me and thinks, well, Brian has the power that if I want to do something, I'll just go ask Brian and he'll tell me I can go do it, And it's strange because that idea of rule and dominion, when it comes to God, had everything to do with care and taking care of the creation and caring for it the way God would care for it. Like, and I don't want to go all weird on us or anything, but I think it even goes back to like how we care about our animals. Like, I'm not a cat lover, okay? Like, I don't like cats. I'm not sure what happened with God when he was creating stuff and he decided to create a cat, but I'm just not a cat lover. But would I ever be rude or mean to a cat? Before Jesus Christ, yes. Like, I used to sit around and laugh at the jokes about, plastic bags at the bottom of, lakes and stuff like that, which was totally wrong. But now as a follower of Christ, I have a hard time sometimes killing a spider. Now,
don't have a hard time.
You don't have a hard time. And sometimes, and not all the time, it just depends, but I have a hard time because I know that God created that, and I'm supposed to care for all these things that God, created. And so I think as human beings, the Marxist platform or the leftist or Democrat or Republican, none of that's going to fix it. I think until people start to fill their life with this idea that I got to learn how to live in the kingdom of God and I got to learn how to love people, and they focus on that and get this stuff out of the way, then that's the only hope for America. That's the only hope for the world, period.
I respect that point of view, and I think there's a lot to be said for that point of view. Like, both the thinking that you should take spirituality first and that those other problems will be solved to a certain once you've accomplished that.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think there is some truth to that, and I think I really respect though I wouldn't necessarily not kill a spider.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
respect the respect for life. Have you ever heard of the MOVE organization?
No, I have not.
The MOVE bombing?
Mm-mm.
You should look it up. It's basically when you were talking about that, I was thinking about the ways in which society would like reject that ideology, both the love of life and the connecting with other human beings and trying to get people on the same page in terms of spirituality.
Mhm.
There was this organization called MOVE. They were Christian, but they were like extreme, like don't kill anything, live, vegans, that type.
Oh, okay.
And
I might have a problem with that.
well, yeah, well they were eliminated pretty. You'd have to read the.
When you
story.
say eliminated,
I mean like they
weren't given a voice anymore on social media?
No. I mean like the MOVE bombing, like significant portions of them were killed. The rest were in prison. There's something called the MOVE 9. They were the 9 survivors. There were a bunch of people living in like some majority black city, and were not friends with the police. They didn't hurt anybody, but they lived on their own in a kind of cultish manner. But they never hurt anybody. They were very generally good people, but they lived by these principles, and that didn't sit well with these people. And over the course of many months, it eventually got to the point where they were holed up in like an apartment building, and the police started literally dropped bombs on these people and burned down the place and shot a bunch of them up. And I think if you wanted to create a society like that, you would see some extreme pushback.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily subscribe to all of those things, but I do think you should connect with people spiritually. But at the same time, you got to watch out because we are living in a sinful world, and people will do things like that.
Right.
So
And what as you were talking there, whether it's a group of people who decide they want to value life, and like here's what's strange is you'll have people fighting for a beached whale and trying to get that back in the water, and yet they're totally okay with a mom aborting a child at 6, 7, 8 months.
yeah,
That's not cool. Like, to me, truth is truth. What's right is right. What's wrong is wrong. And it doesn't matter. I mean, I've even been, I've been labeled a lot of things because sometimes people will come to me and they'll be like, hey, I want you to give me your approval on this. And I'm like, no, that's wrong. It's like if something is wrong, it's wrong across the board. So if I'm going to say I value life, all life, that's every life, then I don't compromise that in one place or the other. So for me, like, to kill a spider, I don't necessarily think that's wrong. To kill to cut the legs off of an animal so that it's ground into chuck, ground beef. So to take a cow and to kill it, I don't think that's wrong necessarily, because the Bible clearly tells Noah in chapter 9 of Genesis that it was okay then to kill and to eat meat. But I think it has to be done humanely. So, for instance, I'm not cool with these big slaughterhouses that house all these animals, and it's very horrible situations in that.
Yeah, that's disgusting.
But a nice farm where the animal can live out its days, and then the animal is then killed humanely and used for food. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
So in my opinion, again, you get a group of people, Marxist, Communist, Democrat, Republican, or whatever, if they're not grounded, in my opinion, in the truth of God and His kingdom, then you're never going to solve this problem, because somebody's going to go, oh yeah, I love saving the spiders and the whales, but let's kill the babies. I don't have a problem killing babies because I think a woman should have a choice. See, that doesn't make sense, and the reason that doesn't make sense is because that's human-minded. It's not God-minded. It's building our kingdom and not God's kingdom. And you're always going to have that issue until we get God's perspective on greed and on stuff and on all that. And I don't think any of the people I see, whether it's a Marxist movement, a communist movement, Democratic, Republican, I don't see any of them thinking about the things that we talk about today. Like the things we talk about today, I don't see any of them thinking about it from God's perspective in His Word. I see very few people thinking about it like that.
I would say you're correct. Well, yeah, to respond to all that, I was going to say, by the way, the MOVE thing was in West Philadelphia. Anybody hearing about that should look into that, because that's, and look into it deeply, because there are some lies on the surface. regardless, yeah, we were talking about slaughtering, eating meat. I don't have a problem with that. Yeah, I think that's acceptable. What were we talking? Yeah, about people who will focus on animal rights issues to the exclusion of pressing human issues. Yeah, that stuff's absurd. I think if you're in an animal rights foundation, I mean, fine, but I mean there are some humans dying horrible deaths right now. Maybe you should adjust your attention to them. About abortion, we have our differences. I mean, here's the thing. If you think it's like a baby, as in like a fetus is in your mind the same thing as like a human child that's just born.
But let's not.
I respect that. If you think that, I respect everything you say because that's what you think. I would disagree with that initial assumption.
And when you say you would disagree with the initial assumption, you mean that I think, or that it's there's evidence that says it's an actual baby? What are you disagreeing with?
It's the difference between, it's obviously human, obviously, but it's the difference between a clump of cells that is a mass of life, but that is not necessarily an individual, versus a born baby, which is, I mean, it's the beginnings of an individual there.
So let me ask you this then. So a baby is not technically an individual or a human until it comes out of the birth canal completely? Like, if it had one foot still in the birth canal?
It's a human.
Okay.
And I mean, there are discussions about, like, even amongst people who are proponents of abortion, about when it's ethical and when it's not. I mean, if it's like a week out from being born, I mean, it's a lot of it's stuff together that it feels pain. You know what I mean? It's dreaming. There's precognitive activity. I would say that's the beginnings of an individual right there. However, if we want to go to the other extreme, like as in it's just a blastosphere, I don't know, where it's literally just hundreds of cells and you wouldn't even necessarily see it. At that stage, I mean, I don't understand why people there's no question that it's human, but it's not an individual. So if that were to die, even by natural causes, not even on purpose, would anybody shed a tear? Even if I was the mother, you're talking about feminizing males. No, but like if I was the mother in that situation, I mean, that's not a baby. It's a clump of cells. If it were to die at that stage, it wouldn't.
But if you ask a mother who carried that baby for, a month and a half or however long it took for that clump of cells to start, creating arms and limbs, the mother will tell you, yes, there was an emotional attachment. There was something. I felt something, and this is a problem for me. Because that's the thing. Like we want to boil everything down to empirical evidence. Like it's a clump of cells, so it doesn't really mean anything. But so then where did this emotional attachment come from? Why does the mom feel this emotional attachment? Or are there some moms who say, oh yeah, it is just a clump of cells? And I imagine there are some that will, and they'll just go the other direction and go, hey, I just took a scab out of my uterus.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that the emotional
it's not a baby. I just took a scab.
Yeah.
It was just a scab in there.
The emotional connection, I think, is very dependent on the mother. In other words, I mean, I think a lot of mothers at a certain point understand that there's a baby in there, and like as they grow and develop, like even the beginnings of a personality. I mean, you're getting into dodgy territory, but I mean, there are mothers who would legitimately say and think that, and I wouldn't say they're wrong. I don't know. I wouldn't know.
Okay.
What I will say is that in the very beginning, as in like you don't even know you're pregnant. I mean, even after, let's say, you're pregnant, there is a stage where it's like, especially, I'm just going to go to the most extreme example, when it's a literal zygote, as in one combined cell. At that point, let's say it died, just for natural causes, would you have an emotional reaction? Would that touch you? Like
as a man?
Yeah, as anybody.
I think some moms, yes, it would, because, and I think some men as well. For me personally, as a man, it probably would not touch me, because for me, as a person, my personality, who I am, I have to experience and become emotionally attached to someone before I feel the pain of loss. And that's just me personally.
I would agree. I feel that.
So as men, maybe that's different from women. We'd have to have some women in here and speak to us about that, because...
Yeah, I was going to say we're both men. I mean, obviously.
Right, so that would be different. Although if we could get feminized, maybe we could feel differently.
Yeah.
All right.
Got a tampon?
Here's the question then. I may not feel it, but the woman may. But the question is not necessarily whether I feel it or not. So, for instance, if we know that this one cell, a sperm, gets through the outer membrane of the egg and fertilizes it, and it becomes a cell. So now you have DNA from the male and DNA from the female, and those two come together to make one cell. Now, if that cell is allowed to grow the way it's supposed to, we say it will become a human being, right? So what would you do in a society then that says that this child now, it somehow it got out, it grew in the belly and it got out, but it's got some issues now.
As in, like,
maybe it's not as smart as we like it to be. Maybe it's just it has some cognitive functions that aren't the way we think it should be. Maybe it's one left arm doesn't work, real well, and so it's never going to be a left-handed
the baseball
batter.
pitcher that it
Yeah, the southpaw that we wanted it to be, or whatever. As a boxer, where we wanted to do that. So we could say it's technically a child now, but it's not productive to society. So before it gets to be a human being, before it gets to be an adult now, because it could be an adult one day, it could be, but it's not. It's just a child right now, but it could be it could be an adult. But before it gets to be an adult, now we decide, because it's not what we think we want, which is really technically, let's face it, if a husband and wife, one cell starts in the belly, the reason that child is terminated is because someone says, I don't want that.
Because a human said.
Not just a human, but an adult human.
Yeah, just saying, like, that's a human's decision and not God's necessarily. I understand what you're saying.
Okay, so now all of a sudden you've got a society that says, okay, that child now, we don't want it to become an adult, so we're going to terminate it now. Where does it end?
Well, that's the thing is, we don't know. We're seeing some of that right now with you've heard of designer babies, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, there are things like that.
I'm pretty sure I've watched a couple people from high school get married so that they could have a designer baby.
Yeah.
Now that's not the designer baby you're talking about, I don't think. But two people getting together who have certain skills or athletic abilities, and you see them, and you're like, man, did they think they were going to create a superstar or something? It's interesting to watch.
Well, that's the thing is, you can see that even before there's any baby. People, I know what you're talking about, like with that, and maybe that's, I don't know. It can go in a lot of ways, but ethically, if you want to talk about the morals of it, it kind of depends on the thing. If you want to make a baby, like literally genetically engineer a human, which can happen, to be a certain thing, maybe be a great boxer, be a scientist, whatever.
Right.
Is that unethical? It doesn't sit right with me. If there is ever any merit to saying humans are playing God, you would think it'd be there. So, is it ethical? I don't think so. It doesn't sit right with me. Maybe I'm just being illogical. That's how I feel.
Uh-huh.
In terms of aborting children, fetuses, whatever terminology you want to use, for certain conditions, I think once again it depends on the situation. If there's because there are some cases where things that are going to be fatal. In other words, they have conditions that will kill them. In many cases, not long after, like a week or a month after they get out.
And that there are situations where doctors tell the parents that this is going to happen, so you should abort. They don't abort, and the child lives. You know that, right?
Oh yeah, that's happened.
Okay.
And that's the thing is that that's where you get into the morally gray area. If you have a baby that's going to come out where it's incredibly likely it's going to die, where there's that Cyclops thing where basically their brain's exposed. There's a bunch of conditions we can go through.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't blame somebody if they're like, this child's going to come out. It's going to, it's going to die. And the moments that it does happen in this life, it's going to be suffering. If they make the decision to end it, I wouldn't be like, that's wrong with you. If you, on the other hand, have a child where it's like, this child, I don't know if they can detect this, but if they're like, oh, this child might be autistic, and you decide, oh, well, I'm going to kill it. Once again, I'm not the mother. I would say that's irresponsible and unethical. But I think even if in every case you say it's immoral, I think we would both agree that there are different instances where some are more reasonable than others, like the former versus the latter.
Okay.
You agree with what I'm saying there?
I would say there is good. People feel they have good reason to make those decisions, and if they made those decisions, I'm not sure I necessarily would be able to come back and judge them on that decision, on some of those decisions that you're talking about. However, I still believe that God has ordained life to be the most precious thing that there is. You go back in Leviticus, the life is in the blood. Life was very precious. If you take a life, yours should be taken. So life is of ultimate value. And I don't think we should be the ones who dictate whether it's taken or not. Now, at the same time, I understand if someone's on life support, well, pull the plug. Well, in my opinion, maybe we don't even put people on life support because, there is a time to die. Solomon wrote that in Ecclesiastes. There's a time to die and there's a time to live. So there's a time for everything. And so I understand some of these things are complicated. But at the end of the day, God definitely values life. And the other thing I think that should be said here is that if somebody out there who would listen to this later on, you have had an abortion or you've done that, we are not saying that that means that you are a horrible person or whatever. But what we are saying is that God does offer forgiveness. And God does care about people who make decisions based on however they make decisions. If those decisions ultimately are wrong, there is always forgiveness. There is always kindness and grace in God's sight among people. And so, because I think sometimes when we have these discussions and someone like me from a religious standpoint says abortion is wrong, people automatically say, well, that means you're saying that I can't be forgiven or that God doesn't love me because I had an abortion. And I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying, it's just like anything else, any other kind of sin or anything that will go against God. God has grace and mercy for those people. Now, Naomi did comment on this whole situation, and she did say that she liked you until you made that last comment.
Oh,
but I imagine she still loves you.
Yeah.
Because knowing Naomi, she still loves you.
The last comment about what specifically?
Probably about the women not feel. So let me just read it. As a mother that has been through 6 miscarriages, I feel tremendous loss, regardless if it was 6 or 8 weeks or 20 weeks. I still cry over my lost infants. And so, yeah, from a female standpoint, I think we would never understand that, and we don't understand that.
Yeah, absolutely not. But I would just say to Naomi, we're talking as generally as possible about policy and about things about the efficacy. I don't know about whether or not we should have abortion at all, and have a conversation about how different mothers feel. I mean, in terms of the miscarriages you've experienced and the emotional connection to your children, I would never speak to that under any circumstances whatsoever. And the emotional connection you feel and the spiritual connection you feel, that's between you, your children, and God.
And I just want to say that's smart because she does CrossFit. And I'm afraid that if she were to show up, if she were to get a plane,
lay the smack down.
You could be in trouble. Yeah.
I don't know what CrossFit is. It sounds intense.
Well, CrossFit. It's the exercise.
Yeah,
she does CrossFit, and so I'm thinking she could probably bench press you, maybe. Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. No, but yeah, that's the thing is, that's between you and God, and I would not comment negatively on that. I don't care, what week it is. If you feel a connection with your child, you feel a connection with your child. That's between, like I said, your child and God.
Yeah, and maybe that means too that as men, we should probably never.
Yeah, maybe it should be 2 women talking about this. You know what I mean?
We should never speak about what a woman would feel. Now, as men, like we just discussed, at 6 weeks, we may feel absolutely nothing. And again, I don't think that men should get beat up for that, but we definitely can't speak into what women would feel at that. And as far as I'm concerning, this is my personal opinion, whatever a woman feels or does not feel, like someone different than Naomi, say this woman says, I felt nothing. I still believe that the question still is that if you believe that a sperm and an egg coming together create a cell that could eventually be a human being, a child, and you say it's okay to take that into your hands and terminate that, then what's to stop someone from taking a child? Because you say, I don't want that, so now I'm going to terminate it. What's to stop someone in the future, which there are already laws in place in New York and different places, where you can take a child out, lay the child on the table, so now that child is technically born, you can lay it on the table and discuss whether the mother wants to abort or not, and then if the mother decides to abort, you can abort. Then there have also been a guy by the name of Peter Singer. I won't remember what college he taught at or where he was teaching at, but he suggested, this was years ago, he suggested that up to 3 and I believe maybe even possibly 7 years of age, if you found that this child was not going to be productive in society, you could terminate this child. So it doesn't. It's not going to stop. I mean, we think the Jewish Holocaust was bad. This, in my opinion, is worse, and it's leading to something that's worse. Because now all of a sudden you have a child that it's not going to be a productive part of society. Now you can just terminate it.
Well, yeah, that's something that, I mean, that
And then all of a sudden now you have adults who aren't productive part of society. You can just terminate them.
I feel where you're coming from. That has to a certain degree evolved out of, abortion. And that, I mean, it comes from, what am I trying to say? There's a portion of that where you get to things like designer babies and things like aborting, fetuses for whatever the reason is.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's stuff which comes outside of that is eugenics and things like, ethnic cleansing and things of that nature.
Correct.
That's been around, for as long as, humans have existed.
Right.
And I mean, that's a conversation where, talk about, killing adults for whatever reason, that is far beyond abortion. That goes into, social policy and the things people think about other people.
Right.
Racism. Is there a word for being bigoted against people who are disabled in various ways?
I don't know what the
ableism, but that's
maybe.
ableism. But no, yeah, that's a conversation outside of abortion. And I mean, you talk about it never stopping; it won't stop. But I mean, there's an ongoing conversation. I think we would both agree that there's a difference between somebody who says, well, this person's retarded. They need to be,
which is a politically correct wrong.
Yeah. Not a politically correct way to say it. That's why I'm playing a character here. But yeah, that's the thing, is people who would say that, and I think that's absolutely wrong and it's horrible and terrible, but that's, I think, far removed from, say, a woman having a conversation with her doctor or her husband and God about whether or not she wants to have a child. Even if that child is totally, we're not talking about a situation where there's a genetic defect, even in a situation where it's just a child.
Uh-huh.
I think there's a world of difference there. Can there be interconnections, and can there be a thing, especially where we're talking about designer babies, about, having children that are designed to be a certain way, or otherwise not having children because they have a defect? Can they get into moral gray area? Yeah,
right.
But I don't think it necessarily leads to Holocaust.
Naomi just said she has a 30-year-old at home and she still wouldn't terminate him.
That's pretty good.
You might want to help him find his way out, though.
Yeah, I was going to say,
sometime before he turns 40, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been a good discussion, and obviously we haven't solved any problems. We've gone a little bit over.
What conclusions have we reached, though?
The conclusion we reached is that Iran is going to be a problem forever.
Maybe.
Probably until Jesus returns.
Western imperialism is going to be a problem for a while, too.
Yeah, it will be. Yeah, it's not going to be solved overnight. Yeah.
By the way, become a Marxist. Read some Marx.
And I think what we also determined is that this culture is trying to feminize men, and I think men need to step up and be men. But listen, that doesn't
going to happen.
But see,
you can't do that to a population of males. It just won't happen.
Oh,
I don't see that ever happen.
Seriously,
what? I think you can. See
I know married men right now. Okay,
who don't wear the pants in a relationship.
Well, they can't make decisions, because if they make a decision, that's not gonna. I know people that say happy wife, happy life.
I can understand why they say that.
But see, like, in my opinion, that's wrong. And the reason that's wrong is because
you don't treat April well.
But I don't treat her well so that I can have a happy life. Like, when they say stuff like that, that means just give the woman enough
denial.
so that I get
want, so long as you leave me
alone. That I get what I want.
I think that's irresponsible.
Sure it is.
But once again, that you've seen since the beginning of time. Nothing's changed there.
Right. So the question is then, if you're going to be a real man, step out and figure out how to serve your wife, how to take care of your wife, so that she is a woman who then turns around and wants to serve you. Because that's what the Bible says we're supposed to do. We're supposed to love our wives as Christ loved the church. And how did Christ love the church? He gave himself up for her. And so if I'm giving myself up for April, there's a reason why I don't really have a problem like with April in my marriage. Like, I have a happy marriage. I mean, is everything perfect? No. Do we ever argue? Yes. But for the most part, I would say I'm very happy. And the reason I would say that is, and it's not about my happiness, because when I'm not happy, I don't go, oh, I got to get a new one, or I'm done with April, or I'm not happy because it's April's fault. But what I'm saying is I'm really happy, but that hasn't happened because I've made April happy. That's happened because I've pursued God with everything that's in me, and I've tried to love, since day one, I've tried to love April, and I've learned how to love her better. And I'm telling you what, if you were with us in our earlier years, like when we were in Florida, I mean, I'm pretty sure if we wouldn't have been in Florida, we easily could have been divorced, because it was probably pretty hard for her to love me, and it was hard sometimes to love her. I mean, she's a pretty special person, but she can get pretty violent, and not in a bad way.
Okay, I was gonna say,
And she knows I'm joking if she were to watch this. But I guess what I'm saying is this: men need to step up, and they need to start, living in a way that serves their wife and helps their wife to see and understand, what it means not only to be a man, but what it means to be a woman as well. And I think men need to take control of that role. And I don't think men need to wimp out and go, oh, happy wife, happy life, so I'll just give her what she wants so I get what I want. That to me is not a recipe for a good marriage.
No,
that's a recipe. That's a recipe for divorce in about 10 or 15 years is what that is.
So it's a strategy that's not going to work long, and also it's a strategy. It's not treating them as a person. It's how am I going to survive this legal agreement we have?
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I feel you. But
Exactly.
On the point about feminizing males, I was just going to say you'll see some social change, and you may see some exchange of power in terms of who has the power in the legal agreement that is a marriage. And you'll see a whole host of things, but you're never going to see a feminized male population because it simply can't happen. As long as there's testosterone in males' veins.
They're taking it out of us, though.
You're right, but
With the milk and all these other products that are lowering our testosterone levels.
Is this going to be a Brave New World type situation?
Raising our estrogen levels?
Listen, I feel you.
I'm
never going to happen.
All right. I'll tell you this right now. The only reason I still have male characteristics in me.
Okay.
All right, you want to listen to this?
I'm listening.
The only reason stuff is still working, I think, is because God continues to help me. Because I'm telling you what, I am one of those guys who went to the doctor one day, and the doctor's like, you got low T. And I'm like, what? And then he wanted to put me on all these therapy treatments, and I'm like, no, I'm going to go the natural route, and I'm going to figure out how to get this back.
Chop down some trees.
Yeah. Now I'm back. When I first went in, they were like, you got the testosterone levels of about an 80-year-old man. I'm probably at around, I don't know, 58 to 60 right now as far as my levels. But that's better. But that's all just naturally doing that. But I'm telling you, I get tired sometimes. At 47, I should not be tired, and at different times, I should not feel the way I feel. And part of that is because every time you turn around, I mean, I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist, but I really think the stuff that we are consuming and the things that are in our society now that we've done in the name of making society better or having things more convenient for us, because we don't want to just work by the sweat of our brow. Like the Bible told us we were supposed to. Now we are reaping the consequences, the benefit, or the consequences, and we are seeing a male population that is actually becoming less male and more feminine.
I think there's a whole host of reasons for that. Part of it is you were talking about convenience and about people not working for things.
Right, and not to mention, I think Danielle McAllister, I think in her new book that comes out in February, I think she talks about this a little bit, and that is that young men are not taught anymore how to go out and beat each other up and play football and get slammed against a wall and get a cut and deal with that cut, because they're all sitting inside playing games or doing
that was my childhood, and I grant you that. Is like, I didn't not to dunk on my parents.
I'm not saying you're feminine, because you got a really deep voice, much deeper than mine. Yeah, you got a really deep voice.
But you're right in that. That's part of it. In that I think as things develop, like video games and alternative ways of, like, when you were a kid, older generations, what did you do for fun?
Yeah.
You played football because what else? You played basketball.
Yeah.
You fought each other because there was nothing else to do.
Yeah.
Now that there are things to do, you do see. I mean, you see.
We shot each other with BBs.
Yeah. You
see actual BBs.
Actual? Whoa! Are you talking about not
like a BB gun? But
okay,
but they didn't come out as pop. They weren't like a 10 pumper.
Okay, I was gonna say, like,
you still could have taken. You still could have taken it.
Yeah. But point is, as you see this advance into, like, alternative ways of people entertaining themselves, you see a rise in obesity. You see a rise in people just not understanding that this is a physical world, and you should have a relationship with nature, and you should have a relationship with pain, and like doing activities that will take a physical toll, but also have a physical benefit. I mean, we're humans. We get an endorphin rush when we run, when we do stuff. I didn't have a relationship with my body in that manner until I went to college, surprisingly enough, and I took a boxing class. I ran a little bit more. I'm in better shape than I was, and I've gained a little bit because I was over the break.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think people do need to realize that, because ultimately we're humans, and humans like physical activity.
Right.
We don't have a relationship with our body. We don't have a relationship with nature the way we should. There are a lot of things that we don't have a relationship with God the way we should.
Right.
We should fix that. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I would grant a lot of that. But the reason your low T thing and your improvements or whatever, it wasn't because April was like crushing some pills and you know what I mean.
Right.
And you fixed that. I just don't think I don't think we'll ever see a situation where like there's a coordinated like government type effort to feminize males because I don't see it happening.
However, Hillary, I think, was making sure that she was putting the antibiotics in the cows so that the milk had antibiotics, which lowered testosterone.
Listen, Hillary's a snake, but I think you're giving her too much credit. Anyway.
All right. Well, it's way past time.
Wow.
So, all right. We appreciate everybody that's been on today. Our conversations, obviously, we went so long, and it went really fast. And the reason for that is because it was a lot of fun having you on.
That was very fun.
So listen, if you have a free Friday, you need to come back sometime, maybe even when Matt's here or whatever, and we'll do this again.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I'd like to have
We'll talk again. All right. So,
have I made you a Marxist?
Have you made me a Marxist?
Not yet.
No, not at all. Because I don't think it has to do with the haves and the have-nots. I think it has to do with the heart of a person who has or a person who has not, and a heart that is after God's kingdom will bring a society to a place where we will respect and honor and love people whether they have or whether they have not. And nobody in that society then is going to feel like I have to have, and the person that has isn't going to feel guilt because this person doesn't have. But there may be times this person who has is going to say, because of God, is going to say, you know what, I want to bless that person and I want to do this for them. And at the same time, that person who doesn't have isn't going to say, well, I'm going to work my tail off so I can have all that stuff, because there's not going to be greed in that kind of a society. There's going to be a place that says, you know what, I'm where I'm at and I'm working this, I'm doing this thing that God's called me to do, and I'm okay with that. I'm totally okay with that.
If everybody learned to love God and love people. Yeah,
that's true. That's our mission statement. Did you know?
That is. Yeah.
You knew that, right?
That's why I said that.
All right.
Advertise.
My goodness, Garrett. You know a lot more than people give you credit for. I'm telling you that right now.
Well, I'm pretty dumb. Dude, it's that Marxist theory, man. You should read some letters.
This is a smart young man right here. So we'll definitely have you back on again. So other than that, you guys have a great weekend. If you don't have a place to worship and you're local, you can worship here with us. You can go to anycommunity.org and find our information. And if you're on YouTube, you can go to our YouTube channel and you can press the subscribe button and you can get all of our updates and those kind of things. So until next week, we will see you later.